Hey there everyone, Hitesh here, back again with another video, and in today's video we're going to talk about Android development versus iOS development. Now I know, hearing with this, a lot of people just don't want to watch this video and want to jump directly into the comment section to fight about iOS is better than Android or Android is better than iOS. No, this is not a video for that. I know this is a little bit controversial thing, but I know you are a fan of either one of them. But in this video, we will rather focus on which one is easier to learn, what are the hurdles for the other ones, what are the pros and cons of Android and iOS, and what you should be looking up whenever you are learning Android development or iOS development, or things related to that, like hardware specifications, software requirement, the fees to upload your app into the store, and a lot of such things. So let's discuss all about them. But first, let's roll that intro. Now, I have categorized this video into a couple of specific sections where we talk about a different topic in each section. So let's get started and talk about the Android and iOS development learning phase. Now, the very first thing is the hardware requirement. Now, depending on in which country you are, the hardware requirements are a little bit obvious to have or not so obvious to have. Because in countries like India, the Windows is kind of a dominating operating system, rather than in the United States where Mac is rather a little bit more dominating operating system. So for the people in United States, it's really common to learn iOS development rather than in countries like in India where learning the Android development is much more common because the hardware is far more accessible. Now, I do agree that Mac hardware is a little bit expensive compared to the Windows hardware, but again, when you add up the cost of buying a good Windows hardware with a good amount of RAM and your cost of your Windows 10 and some Microsoft suite, it almost adds up if you go like that. But again, no problem with that. So the very first hardware hurdle is for the Mac or iOS development, you need to have a Mac. It might be an iMac or maybe Mac Mini or MacBook Pro, MacBook Air, anything, but you definitely need a hardware that is Apple oriented. But for the Android development, you can get started with any kind of hardware, whether it's a Mac, Windows, Linux, or whatever operating system you are using. So I would give a thumbs up to the Android in this section because it's far more easier to get that. Now let's come on to the next section, which is specific hardware upgradation. Now, luckily, in case for the Android development, if you have bought your hardware within a couple of years, you're really ready and good to go for the Android development, because I highly recommend that whenever you're getting started with Android development, go for at least 8 gigs of RAM and maybe a little bit latest processor in your computer or laptop. And chances are high, if you have purchased your laptop within a recent couple of years, you are really good to go. On the other hand, if you are already on the iOS, they really do produce good machines, and if you have purchased your Mac in recent 3 or 4 years, or maybe at least for 5 years, if it is getting the latest update from the Apple Store about the OS, then you are ready, good to go. So that is all sorted out. Now the next thing comes up is the licensing, and I do have a lot of issues and point in the licensing issues here. Maybe you might not agree with my point of views, but I have to state this. So the licensing issues with the iOS and Android is completely different. For the iOS, it's $99 a year. Yes, that's kind of a subscription that you have to pay to upload your app in the App Store. On the other hand, the Android is far more cheap. That's almost $30, and that's a lifetime access to upload any apps that you want to have in the Google Play Store. But what I want to say here is this is actually bad. Apple is charging $99, that is a little bit overpriced, but we'll talk about that in a second. But what the Google is doing by taking just $30 and uploading n number of apps is actually a little bit bad, that I have feel somewhere. Why? Because let's just say Apple is taking just $30, he should charge that $30 over every year, because this reduces the amount of crappy app that is on the App Store. But Google is all about numbers now, because obviously it has to compete with the Apple App Store, and that is having all those giant number of apps. So what Google is trying to do, he's just saying, hey, pay me this amount of fees as kind of a formality and just keep uploading. This results in ending up a lot of clones of apps, a lot of crappy apps, because it's not very pricey and a lot of people are just pushing out those crappy apps. These can be reduced by charging overly fees. But again, as a beginner's perspective, it's rather far more easier to pay $50 or $30 as compared to $99 every year. Now, with this $99, the user are only updating their licensing if their app is doing pretty good, and this makes that the app market is far more filtered in the App Store, Apple App Store. Now also, when you submit your app, it takes a little bit more time in the Apple App Store. Now recently in the WWDC they have said that we are reducing that time, but again they are far more strict in the app development. They look out for all the memory leaks and all those things, graphics, their pixel by pixel points and everything. So chances are high that your app will get selected quite pretty easily in the Google Play Store as compared to the Apple App Store. But that is actually a good thing in the Apple App Store, because your app would be far more refined and far more revised as compared to the Google Play Store, which is just directly accepting the app. So for me, I would say it's a thumbs up for the Apple, because they are far more strict in accepting the app and in renovating the license on a monthly basis. But I know a lot of people will just say that Android should get a thumbs up because it's very less fees and it's far more easy. Easy means more crappy app in the Google Play Store. Now next up comes up is the IDE, or Integrated Development Environment. Now when you write code for iOS, you use Xcode, and when you write code for Android, you use Android Studio. Now somehow I have felt that the Xcode is far more dominating with the Android Studio. Yes, things have changed quite a lot in the Android Studio version 3, and I'm really happy that now you don't have to use third-party softwares like Genymotion to speed up your performance of the emulator in the Android. Now the default emulator is far more better than the previous version 1 of the Android Studio. But hey, everybody, when they get upgrades, they get better. And on the other hand, the Xcode is far more mature software, because it has seen actually quite a lot of phases of development. So I would say that working on the Xcode is far more easier and less buggy as compared to the Android Studio. But again, I would not give so much of the credit to the Apple, because Xcode is almost on the version 9, so it has been more revised, more refined as compared to the Android Studio. It's far more new, but still it's doing good. Now one thing that I like about the Android Studio is the layout options. Arranging the things and layout is far more easier in the Android as compared to the Xcode. They still are struggling with those linear layouts and these compound layouts. But apart from this, the less buggy and all these things, I would say Apple is actually dominating here. But only with the version 3 of the Android it is doing so good, and they have fixed almost the bug of laggy emulators and everything. So I would say in this case, the Google gets a thumbs up here, because in just version 3 he's doing so good and so great as compared to the Xcode. But again, there is no match for Xcode because it's just awesome. So yeah, both gets a thumbs up here, because both are awesome. But somehow again, Xcode is a little bit far mature, and Android Studio have to do a little bit tweaking much more. But I'm really happy about the Genymotion thing, that you don't have to install now Genymotion, you can just work on the emulator. It works really fine. Now again, let's come on to the clumsy code. Now I'm a big fan of writing clean codes, and if I compare writing the codes in Java versus writing code in Swift, I would say writing code in Java is far more verbose. Everything is just displayed in front of you. There are so many semicolons, so many curly braces. Some people feel this is good, but I prefer rather writing the code in Python style. No semicolons, indentation matters a lot, and no curly braces and all these things. So I prefer Swift style of writing code in that case. So It's just a personal preference. You cannot just say one gets a thumbs up, one gets a thumbs down, because it's just a personal preference. So I won't giving a voting for this kind of thing. But personally for me, I prefer less clumsy code or less verbose code in this case. So I would prefer Swift. But again, Java is also a good language in writing the code, but the verboseness of the Java is something that I'm not a big fan. Now, next come up is the learning amount. Now, obviously, you're looking up to learn some of the boot camps in iOS and some of the boot camps in the Android. So I would say the iOS boot camps are far more expensive as compared to the Android boot camps. Now, iOS boot camp, I have taken those boot camps offline as well. Usually cost like $1,000 to one student, and in the iOS bootcamp I have seen usually 20 students or 15 students. So $1,000 is a pretty big amount. It usually goes maybe up than that, like $1,200 or $1,400 for an offline bootcamp. And I'm talking about the professional bootcamps that actually delivers 3 or 5 or maybe 10 apps in those 20 days or 30 days of the practical scenario. It's not just like a training institute where you just go and just learn things in a 2-month and you don't even get an app at the end of that training. It's like a rigorous bootcamp. The quality ones, they actually cost in the iOS like $1,200 to $1,400-ish. And if I talk about that in India, the prices are almost same. They cost around $40,000 to $45,000 to learn iOS development, professional ones. While on the other hand, if you talk about for the Android development, they are a little bit cheap, but not so much cheap. Because if you're looking for a quality bootcamp that actually talks about Firebase, layouts, and deliver 3 to 5 apps, they usually cost like $20,000 to $25,000-ish. Prices may vary, depends on the quality of the training, but again, I'm talking about the special quality bootcamps, not just any training. So yes, comparing to the $1,000 to just $400 or $500 is far more difference here. So for a beginners, it is easier to go into the Android because it's a little bit cheaper for the quality trainings. One more topic is Userbase. Now, obviously, if you're learning Android or iOS, it's just not like you are learning madly anything. You want to have some goals in mind, like whether I want to get a job or I have an app idea in my mind that I want to present to the user base. So it always needs to be clear up that what is your target audience, because if your app is far more like oriented towards the United States audience, obviously you might want to get with the iOS development and not with the Android. Android users are far less in the United States. On the other hand, if you'll compare that to India, you might want to get started with Android development because Android base is quite heavy in India and other continents nearby to India. But iOS is getting popularity now, but still the user base of iOS is far more less. So depending on where your user base is, you might want to launch that app. Now, one more thing that you have to add up here is when you want to get started with iOS app here on Android app, make sure you do understand that the purchasing user base, the user who actually purchase your app, is much more in the iOS and compared to the Android. So if you're looking up to make money, that people buy some features of your app or even buy your app, you might want to go into the iOS development, because I have seen this, and this is actually a true graph. Look up at any website, you'll find that users actually buy more on the iOS as compared to the Android. Android users are moreover looking for the free apps. So this is a big decision you have to make while learning. And if you're learning just for the job perspective, that I want to work for a company, then again you have to look up what company you want to go up. If your company is based in the United States and you want to go there, obviously iOS would be the choice. But if you are looking for the companies in India that want to work here and want to work for such company who is targeted in India, then obviously Android would be your choice. It's a big decision, so take out some time and try to decide which one you want to go. Okay, so this was a very thorough discussion about what you need to have, what you don't need to have. And again, these are just my personal thought, what I think is happening around the industry and what should be aware, a new user should be aware of these situations. So these are just the personal thought, and in case you think that I've missed some particular topic in which the comparison should have been made, definitely we can roll out the version 2 of this particular video. But I think this video would be really super helpful for everybody to understand the difference before jumping into the iOS and Android development. And definitely we do have courses on both the iOS and Android. Check out the link in the description below, and I can definitely help you out with the affordable and quality trainings in both of them. And again, definitely very soon we are starting some offline boot camps again. This is the time when again I start with the offline boot camps, and definitely you will be getting all the information in the mail, and very soon we'll be hosting those boot camps all around the globe. So wherever you are residing, any part of the world, there are high chances that we'll be hosting a boot camp maybe nearby in your country. So with this, I would say drop down your comments in the comment section below. If I have missed out any particular topic, do let me know, and I'll surely read those comments and will answer them. With this, I would say, hey, Sunday is very nearby, and catch you up in the Sunday Live.